There is a deadline that every XRP holder needs to know about, and most of you do not know it exists. Senator Bernie Moreno, the United States Senator who has been one of the most vocal advocates for the Clarity Act in Congress, just issued a warning that changes the entire timeline for XRP's most important catalyst of 2026. He said this: "If the Clarity Act does not reach the Senate floor by May, it is effectively dead until after the 2026 midterm elections." Dead until after the midterms. That means if Congress does not pass this bill in the next 30 to 40 days, XRP holders would be waiting until at minimum late 2026 or early 2027 for the regulatory clarity that every analyst says is the single most important catalyst for XRP's price recovery. And the Senate Banking Committee, which must clear the bill before it can reach the Senate floor, has targeted a late April markup. The Senate just returned from recess on April 13th. That gives the committee approximately 3 weeks to schedule and complete its markup hearing before the May deadline becomes a real threat. 3 weeks. That is how much time is left on the clock for the most important legislative event in XRP's history. I have been covering XRP on this channel for weeks, and in that time I have explained the Clarity Act multiple times in different contexts. Today I am going to do something different. I am going to give you the complete picture, the specific consequences if the bill passes, the specific consequences if it fails, the exact timeline you need to watch, and why this specific 3-week window is the most important period for XRP since the commodity classification in March. Stay with me, because this is the video that explains everything else. Step 1. What the Clarity Act actually is and why it matters more than any other XRP catalyst. Let me start with the basics, because despite covering this bill for weeks, I know from your comments that many viewers still are not completely clear on what the Clarity Act actually does. The Clarity Act is proposed United States federal legislation that establishes a permanent legal framework for digital assets in America. It defines how cryptocurrencies, including XRP, should be classified under federal law. It determines which regulator has authority over digital assets. And it creates the specific legal permissions that regulated U.S. financial institutions need to use digital assets like XRP for settlement. Right now, without the Clarity Act, here is the situation. XRP was classified as a digital commodity by the SEC and CFTC on March 17th. That was important. But it was guidance, not permanent federal law. Guidance can be reversed by the next administration. Guidance does not give compliance teams at major banks the legal certainty they need to commit their balance sheets to XRP-based settlement. The Clarity Act converts that guidance into permanent law. Once it passes, XRP has the same legal status certainty that natural gas or oil has as a commodity. Banks cannot be held liable for using it. Pension funds can add it to portfolios. Endowments can allocate to it. Sovereign wealth funds can consider it. And here's the most critical mechanism. Banks using Ripple's infrastructure right now are choosing RLUSD and fiat over XRP specifically because their compliance departments cannot approve XRP settlement without permanent federal legal clarity. Deutsche Bank, Societe Generale, Aviva investors, all using Ripple, none using XRP for actual settlement, all waiting for the Clarity Act. When the Clarity Act passes, every bank that is already connected to Ripple's infrastructure gets the legal green light to switch from RLUSD to on-demand liquidity with XRP. That switch creates real buying and selling demand for XRP tokens, the kind of demand that directly moves the price. Analysts at CoinMarketCap project that Clarity Act passage could trigger $4 to $8 billion in new XRP ETF inflows. $4 to $8 billion into a market where available exchange supply is at historic lows. The price math of that scenario is potentially explosive. Step 2. The exact timeline that makes the next 3 weeks critical. Let me walk you through the specific calendar that every XRP holder needs to have in their mind right now. April 13th, the U.S. Senate returned from recess. This is the first day the Clarity Act could formally move forward in the Senate Banking Committee. Late April, the Senate Banking Committee has targeted its markup hearing for the Clarity Act in this window. A markup hearing is where senators formally debate and amend the bill before voting to send it to the full Senate floor. It is a critical procedural step. Without a successful committee markup, the bill cannot advance. May deadline. Senator Moreno's warning. If the bill does not reach the Senate floor by May, it is dead for 2026. Congressional calendars are packed with other priorities after May. The midterm election cycle increasingly dominates legislative attention. Bills that miss their window in the spring session historically struggle to revive in the second half of a congressional year. This means the Senate Banking Committee markup must happen in the next 3 weeks. It must produce a positive vote, and the bill must be scheduled for a full Senate floor vote before the end of May. That is a compressed timeline. But it is not impossible, and every signal from inside Washington suggests the pressure to get this done is real. Step 3. What happens to XRP if the Clarity Act passes in this window? Let me give you the specific scenario analysis, starting with the positive outcome. If the Clarity Act passes the Senate Banking Committee markup in late April and reaches the Senate floor for a vote before May, here is what the data suggests happens next. XRP ETF inflows accelerate dramatically. Right now, XRP ETFs posted $3.56 million in net outflows last week. Weak institutional conviction reflected in weak flows when the Clarity Act passes. The legal certainty barrier that is keeping institutional allocators on the sidelines dissolves. The Coinbase and Ernst & Young survey showed that 25% of fund managers plan XRP allocation in 2026. Many of them are waiting specifically for Clarity Act passage before allocating. When they move, the inflows are substantial. Analysts project $4 to $8 billion in new inflows. On-demand liquidity adoption begins at scale. Deutsche Bank, Aviva, Société Générale, Morgan Stanley naming XRPL as a settlement candidate. The XRP Tokyo 2026 conference held yesterday featuring senior Ripple executives presenting enterprise adoption. All of this institutional infrastructure that has been built and waiting can now activate. Banks switch from RLUSD settlement to XRP ODL corridors. Real token buying and selling demand appears for the first time at institutional scale. XRP price target. Analysts currently project Clarity Act passage pushes XRP above $1.60 immediately. With 4 to 8 billion in new ETF inflows hitting a supply-compressed market, the target range extends significantly higher over the following months. Step 4. What happens to XRP if the Clarity Act misses the May deadline? Now the scenario that XRP holders cannot afford to ignore. If the Senate Banking Committee fails to complete its markup by late April, or if the markup succeeds but floor scheduling delays push the vote past May. Senator Moreno's warning kicks in. The bill is effectively dead for 2026. What does that mean for XRP specifically? The institutional allocation intent that 25% of fund managers expressed stays as intent, not action. They are waiting for legal clarity. Without the Clarity Act, legal clarity does not arrive. The allocations do not happen in 2026. Banks continue choosing RLUSD over XRP for settlement. Deutsche Bank stays on fiat and RLUSD rails. The $13 trillion that Brad Garlinghouse identified as the addressable market for XRP payments does not begin flowing through XRP tokens. 0% of it continues to use crypto. XRP ETF inflows remain weak or turn to outflows. The product exists, but lacks the institutional adoption story that drives sustained inflows. The price remains range-bound between $1.20 and $1.60 throughout the rest of 2026. Vulnerable to any macro shock without the fundamental catalyst to absorb the selling pressure. The analysts who project XRP below $1.20, if Clarity Act stalls are not being extreme, they are reflecting the mathematical reality that without the bill, the specific demand mechanism that connects Ripple's institutional success to XRP token price does not activate in 2026. Step 5. The 3 signals to watch that tell you whether the Clarity Act makes it. You cannot control whether the Clarity Act passes, but you can monitor specific signals that tell you whether the 3-week window is being used effectively. Signal 1. Senate Banking Committee hearing announcement. Watch for Senator Tim Scott, the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, to announce a markup hearing date. If you see a scheduled markup hearing in the week of April 21st to April 25th, the timeline is on track. If no hearing is announced by April 22nd, the timeline is in danger. Signal 2. White House engagement. The Trump administration has been publicly supportive of crypto legislation. Any statement from the White House specifically endorsing the Clarity Act timeline or expressing urgency about passage before May would be a significant positive signal. The president can apply pressure on Senate schedules when he chooses to. Watch for any White House communication about crypto legislation urgency. Signal 3. XRP price action in the April 14th to April 25th window. Markets price in legislative expectations before they happen. If the Clarity Act markup is being scheduled and moving forward, institutional buyers who track Washington closely will begin positioning before the public announcement. Watch for sustained XRP price moves above $1.40 during this window. That would be the market pricing and passage probability. If all three signals are positive, the May deadline scenario becomes the base case rather than the risk case. If any one of them turns negative, the deadline risk becomes real. Step 6. My complete honest conclusion. The Clarity Act is the single most important binary event for XRP in 2026. More important than the SEC commodity classification. More important than the ETF launches. More important than any individual Ripple partnership or acquisition. Because the Clarity Act is the switch that activates everything else. The partnerships mean nothing without legal permission to use XRP for settlement. The ETFs underperform without institutional allocators who can legally commit to the asset. The $13 trillion Ripple Treasury opportunity goes to RLUSD and fiat without the legal framework for banks to use XRP. Senator Moreno's warning is real. The May deadline is real. The 3-week window starting now is real. If you hold XRP, this is the period you have been waiting for. Not to see whether Ripple signs another partnership. Not to see whether another institution files an XRP disclosure, but to see whether the United States Congress makes XRP the legal bedrock of institutional digital payments in America. The answer comes in the next 30 days. Watch the Senate Banking Committee. Watch the White House. Watch XRP price action in the April 14th to April 25th window. Those three things will tell you whether 2026 is XRP's breakout year or XRP's waiting year. Now I want to hear from you. Did you know that the Clarity Act has a hard May deadline before becoming effectively dead for 2026? Type new if this deadline was already on your radar. Type shocked if this is new information that changes how you are thinking about your XRP position. And type watching if you are now specifically monitoring the Senate Banking Committee markup announcement date. Drop your answer in the comments right now. I reply to every comment in the first hour. This is the most important discussion this channel has ever hosted. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell immediately. When the Senate Banking Committee announces its Clarity Act markup date, I am posting a video within hours. When that markup vote happens, I am posting a video within hours. And when the full Senate vote is scheduled, you need to know immediately. Subscribe now. You cannot afford to miss any of these notifications. Thank you for watching. I will see you at the Senate markup, and I will see you in the next one.